Hello and welcome to this sound report about Norand Morphos, which is a special module for Eurorack, and it has an analog sound generation, but the whole tuning and modulators and lots of components are digital, so you get digital access to parameters, which has the advantage that things get really precise. So when you make slight adjustments, in most cases you get responses as hoped or expected. So the whole structure is quite simple, to be honest. We have two oscillators, they both have their own outs. Actually we're hearing only the left one. The two outs can be mixed externally, and the parameters are wave, frequency, through zero, frequency modulation, and detune. So detune changes the sound with an amount of 2 semitones, and it's quite precise. With the wave parameter I can get back to a sine wave or to more distorting or rich with overtones waveforms. But it gets really interesting because I have modulation options within Norand Morphos. There are 8 LFOs that you can't see, or you can also use 8 envelopes, and we have different modulation options. So it's either the CV in or an LFO or an envelope. So in white mode it's the CV in. Well, it looks blue, I have to admit, but that's the white light, and now I'm modulating the frequency with my external Döpfer LFO, and I can switch the amount, which of course makes some kind of jump because it's a digital setting. You don't always see the position of the parameter exactly when you touch it. I'm referring to this later on, but now I'm switching to a different mode. The red mode or orange mode has an internal modulator, which can be an LFO or an oscillator. Actually I'm in oscillator frequency, so apart from through zero frequency modulation there is already some kind of frequency modulation, and I'm switching back to the LFO here right now. You can hear that it's much slower. Oscillator again, LFO, intensity, oscillator, so here you can hear FM. So there are two ways of frequency modulation within Norand Morphos. There is the through zero frequency modulation, which allows positive or negative settings, which is quite comparable to what other attenuators do, that can attenuate or invert. And now I'm adjusting the frequency of oscillator 2, which is the modulator that affects through zero frequency modulation, which also means that the presets that you save for an oscillator don't always sound the same depending on frequency modulation settings with the other oscillator. So right now I want the amount of through zero frequency modulation to be modulated by an LFO, so I hit the knob for through zero FM modulation. It's the 4th knob just on the right of the left oscillator, and the through zero FM parameter knob changes colors when you do that. So if you turn that out and get back to normal white mode, then you don't have any modulation when nothing is inserted in the CV in, and you don't hear what the through zero frequency modulation parameter does. Now I'm switching to envelope mode, and I'm using a trigger, an external trigger, which triggers the envelope, and the amount can be set there, and the decay length can also be set by a rate parameter. So now I'm making it a bit longer. This all works really precisely, and now I want to modulate the frequency via envelope, and you can hear the response. You can turn down the amount, which is kind of stepped. You have certain pitch modulation amounts, so you can do microtonal or other quantized modulation. And what's also interesting about it is that you can save all these settings within a preset. So when you save this in a preset via save and hitting one of the 4 buttons on top, and you change settings, and then you save this to another slot via save. There it is. You can see the light turns on now. Now you can switch between those presets, and also the programming of the modulation is saved within the preset, but only per oscillator. And you can also morph on this strip via the strip on top, or via CV-ins XYZ. And if you change the layer mode, you can switch presets, and you can also switch to a different mode. The white mode allows some 3-dimensional modulation, while as the blue, the red and the green ones allow saving of presets in 4 different banks. So if you have 4 banks with 3 layers, and each layer has 4 presets, that means you have 48 presets that you can store on a per oscillator basis, which of course don't always sound the same, as they may be affected by the other oscillator. You can try to save simultaneously and recall them simultaneously, but you have to be open for surprises. It's more about performing rather than recalling certain states. You can morph between different presets. You can modulate the morphing. You can do it with those preset strips on top, or you can do it with external CV modulation. You see that later on. So now you can hear a little sound tweaking, so you get an impression how it sounds, how the overall sound is. Turning up the volume a little bit. As you can hear, changes are quite subtle sometimes, and the amount of change is precise. I'm switching to another example. And I'm turning the frequency down. So I realized there are a few things I maybe need to explain a little bit more precise. So if you hit the knob for the frequency button, I'm getting back to the microtonal thing. So now I'm having the CV in connected to a keyboard. And as you can see, if it's in middle position, then you can hear that I'm having octave changes. He's really stable regarding tuning. You can step through 10 octaves. That's what the manual says, and I tried it out and sounds really good. Okay. And now if I'm turning the amount down, so the amount of modulation is turned down, then I'm getting a sort of quantized microtonal setting. So when I hit the keys, rather than a semitone, I'm transposing 1/8 of a tone if I turn it down. And there are different settings like a quarter of a tone, a semitone, or only whole tones or two tones. That's what you set with the amount setting when you modulate via CV in the frequency. Then consider you choose different presets with the strip. Then the settings, as said, they don't reflect exactly what you see, as so many things can be programmed. So the values of the parameters may skip if you turn a parameter. Now let's get back to morph a little bit more. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to do this on the strip. I'm trying it here, and well, you have to be careful not to touch the frequency button. But of course, you have to get used to it and have to make it better than I just did. But in many videos you can see people using a joystick, and here I'm trying to use a simple CV output coming from Morphs, and the value of CV that this sends out also plays a role. So in Morphs, the knob says plus minus, whatever it means. You can see that if I turn this, I'm really going through the 4 presets. This can also be seen in the preset strip in the Norand Morphos. So if I go to pressure points, I'm having a different values. Can't really hear what I can't really see what I'm touching, as I'm having my camera in front of my eyes. So going back to Morphs and using the Y input, nothing's going to happen with this simple morphing. Except if I turn on the 3-dimensional mode in white. So it looks blue again, I know, but it's a different blue than the other blue. So right now, also the Y input, sorry I can't see the right knob, also the Y input has an effect, and the X input, which is not connected right now, also affects the sound. So you can turn up to 3 knobs at the same time to get changes of sound in a 3-dimensional way. You're supposed to do this also via the preset strip, but it's a bit more difficult.